Baby steps.
After your faith hasn't let you down.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, a licensed therapist and certified life coach. And over the 13-year history of this podcast, we've shared a lot of listener essays, stories, reflections, and deeply personal explorations from you, the audience. And I've decided it's time to bring some of those voices back to life, to dust them off and, well, resurrect them. We'll call it the morning of the first resurrection. After all, resurrection is really about healing, restoring the body, mind, and soul to their most pristine, integrated state. So I thought, what if we could use modern tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM to create a kind of AI puppet show, a thoughtful, playful deep dive into the mental health layers underneath these listener essays. Now, I'm creating this series for two audiences, primarily. First, for students studying for the National Counselor exam to help you explore these stories as real-world case studies. And second, for anyone who's ever wrestled with similar experiences to help you see the psychological and emotional insights that might apply to your own life. So, it's my pleasure to share these resurrected essays with you, renewed, reimagined, and ready for reflection. All right? Are you ready?
Hang on to your hats and glasses, 'cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
Mormons love stories about communicating with their deceased relatives. One aspect of the transition from believing Mormon to agnostic is that unfinished ancestral business is harder to take care of. You can't reach closure by doing a temple ceremony and tearfully bearing testimony that deceased relatives have accepted the work from the other side and that you'll see them again in the celestial kingdom. My grandparents converted to Mormonism for a short time before returning to Catholicism. My father stayed Mormon, much to his parents' dismay. Now I am neither Catholic nor Mormon in belief. This is what came pouring out of me one Saturday morning as emotion overwhelmed my ability to do housework. Dear Grandma, you can't hear me because you're dead, but I wish you could. I understand your desire to seek a new religion that would put less pressure on you to accept restrictive sexual practices and to bear more children than you wanted. If being Catholic didn't work for you, that's fine. But why did you have to choose the Mormon Church? I know the missionaries did not tell you the implications of your decision. Did you look for information elsewhere? Or did you rashly jump ship at the first opportunity? I know you left Mormonism and returned to the Catholic Church. Could you have tried something else? Almost anything else. You could have been an Episcopalian, a Lutheran, a Methodist, a Unitarian. There were so many preferable churches you could have introduced my father to. I am grateful to you for not choosing to be a Scientologist, a Jehovah's Witness, a Mooney, or a Fundamentalist Baptist. But you could have chosen better for you, for my dad, for me. I'm trying to be much more careful with my religious decisions than either you or Dad. One thing I know, when you save a child from Mormonism or Catholicism, you do not save generations. Because my dad stayed Mormon, I was raised Mormon. As a child in a profanity-free household, I was shocked to hear you swear. You were angry and pushed me away when I tried to hug you. I was 7. I never saw you again. Now I've left the Mormon Church. I'm not going to join your religion either. I am separated from both of the religions of my heritage. My relationship with my dad is often cordial unless I mention his church, but mostly we exchange pleasantries in a superficial relationship. We could have been so much closer if he'd been raised in a more normal household, so that he wouldn't have sought dysfunctional Mormon parents down the street who love-bombed him into a cult. Maybe he wouldn't have had depression without all of the emotional abuse that comes from 2 sets of dysfunctional parents and these 2 extremely guilt-ridden religions. Maybe you could have moved to get my dad away from the Mormons. You moved all the time. It was possible. I know you were worried about his conversion. Grandpa should share some of the responsibility for this as he joined you, but you were the impetus for the change. To be honest with you, Grandma, Grandpa is not the brightest button in the box. I think you knew that, too. I've heard stories of you going around him when he was being pig-headed. Grandpa did tell me how much he loved you, how beautiful you were, and how proud he was to have a good Catholic wife. He showed me a picture of you. You were beautiful. I wish I could have heard your side of the story, had a girl talk one-on-one. I could have sworn with you. I'm old enough to do that now, but you're already dead. I found a stack of letters from your priest thanking you for your help in the parish. I didn't have time to read them when I saw Grandpa for the first time since childhood, visiting your house for the first time. Uncle is going through the house, intending to fix it up. I hope he hasn't thrown them out. Oh, and why did you hide photos of your father in old advertisement books in a drawer? I spent hours separating 50-year-old coupons from unknown family pictures. Luckily, Dad and Uncle already had the scanner and photo albums ready when I found them. I'm not gonna lie, I want to cry. I'm pretty frustrated with you and Dad right now. I wish he'd made better choices too. He's alive, but I can't talk to him about it. You're not alive, and I can't talk to you either. I was never told that you love me. But I suppose you must have, because you sewed me blankets when I was little. I loved them. I wish I knew whether I loved you or not. I do care. I wish I could have met your daughter, too. I never met her before she died, but it seems like she was a lot like me. I know you told her you didn't love her. I suppose I should stop crying and do something with my day. Best wishes, your granddaughter.
That was a great old listener essay from Infants on Thrones. Newly resurrected on the first morning of some karmic kind of ancestral reckoning, maybe, where the veil between memory and body thins to a gauze of trembling breath with not a single Altoid in sight, to stand before the judgment bar of not God, but grief itself. Seriously, just sit with it. As an infant, on a throne, pulling the strings as the man behind the curtain of an AI puppet show like the one you're hearing now. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on, well, a heavy but I think profoundly necessary exploration. Our listener, who we're calling Belinda, she shared just a wealth of source material with us, journal entries, clinical notes, a really detailed map of her family's history with faith and struggle. Mm-hmm. Our mission here is to use the specifics, the texture of her personal journey, leaving a high-control faith system, navigating some really tough family estrangement, dealing with this intergenerational trauma, use it as a kind of universal map.
Yeah, it's more than just one person's story.
Exactly. This isn't just a case study. It's a deep dive into the psychological and even the neurobiological principles of healing.
And this is so valuable, I think, on two fronts. If you're out there studying for the NCE, Belinda's situation is, well, it's almost a perfect storm. You see how all these complex theories, attachment, polyvagal theory, ethics, multicultural frameworks, how they all come together in one person.
Right.
And for anyone listening who might resonate with parts of this, her story gives such a powerful understanding of why sometimes, just analyzing your pain isn't enough. You actually have to feel it, embody the healing somehow. We're basically tracking how religion and family wounds literally get imprinted onto the nervous system.
Okay, let's start with the immediate context. The core action that really kicked off her deep dive into therapy. Belinda walked into her counselor's office, and she came armed with a journal. She saw it as, like, carrying her entire family lineage.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah. And the therapy really started moving when she decided to read this very resolute letter she'd written to her deceased grandmother. She actually called it an exorcism of inheritance.
Wow. That phrase, exorcism of inheritance. That's brilliant. It immediately tells you she's not seeing this as some internal flaw, right?
No, exactly.
It's an external burden, something passed down. It flags right away that the pain is systemic, maybe cultural, not just purely personal. And you can imagine when she reads that opening line, "Dear Grandma, you can't hear me because you're dead, but I wish you could." You'd see the tension maybe in her jaw, the hands trembling.
Oh, for sure.
The body is right there participating in this this ritual. It's remembering what her very brilliant mind has likely been trying to rationalize away for maybe decades.
And within that really charged letter, the therapist picked out 3 lines. We're calling them the 3 neural sparks. They just perfectly summarize the conflict she's grappling with. These are the core wounds that therapy needs to touch.
Yeah, the first one, it cuts right to the heart of that inherited religious pressure. She says, when you save a child from Mormonism or Catholicism, you do not save generations. It really speaks to the immense, often unconscious pressure in these high-demand faiths, the idea that your spiritual success, your obedience impacts your entire lineage. It's a crushing spiritual weight to carry.
Definitely. And the second line, for me, this feels like the blueprint for how she regulates emotion now. It's just this raw memory and attachment rupture. You were angry and pushed me away when I tried to hug you. I was 7.
7 years old, yeah.
That single moment. It's not just a memory in her head, is it? It feels like a nervous system command.
It absolutely is. It's foundational trauma. That moment when she was 7, that's when her subconscious learned a core, devastating lesson about relationships. Vulnerability leads to rejection. Connection equals pain. That just sets the entire stage for how she navigates safety, closeness, boundaries, everything really.
And the third line just reveals the fallout from that, the profound emotional numbing. She says, I wish I knew whether I loved you or not. I do care.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Isn't it? It's the sound of learned disconnection. The intellectual adult part of her knows there's this moral obligation maybe to feel love for her grandmother, but the emotionally protected child inside, the one who got pushed away, she just doesn't have access to that genuine feeling, and it leaves her with this awful uncertainty.
And her upbringing, she described it as being caught between these moral empires, a mix of Catholicism and Mormonism. Both systems, incredibly rigorous in their expectations.
Right.
In those worlds, obedience means belonging. It means salvation. But following her own conscience, her own internal compass, that inevitably led to isolation. She talks about her father staying fiercely loyal to the faith while she left loyal to her own integrity and found herself completely alone in the quiet after belief.
That phrase, the quiet after belief, it must be deafening. It's not just the absence of church bells or hymns. It's the absence of the entire structure of reality she grew up in.
Exactly. The physical building is gone, the community might be gone, but the voice of that institution, it often remains internalized as this incredibly harsh inner critic. And what we often see in survivors of these high control environments is this strange paradox. They have this brilliant cognition. They can analyze their pain incredibly well, read all the books, write journals.
Like Belinda.
Just like Belinda. But it's often mixed with this brittle compassion. The intellectual analysis becomes a very powerful defense mechanism. Analyzing the pain keeps her safe, in a way, from actually feeling the body-shattering grief that's lying underneath it all.
Okay. This feels like the perfect time to unpack this using the biopsychosocial model. This is so foundational for understanding the whole picture of her experience, especially for our NCE students listening. We need to map this system from the cells right up to the social context.
Absolutely. Let's start with the biological strain, Belinda's body. It's practically shouting the evidence of years and years of emotional suppression. She reports this crushing fatigue, shallow breathing, chronic muscle tension, especially neck and shoulders, right?
Classic spots.
Totally. And disrupted sleep digestion issues. These are classic long-term signs of a nervous system that's just perpetually stuck in threat detection mode.
And she used that term functional paralysis. She said, emotion overwhelmed my ability to do housework. That doesn't sound like laziness at all. It sounds like her physical operating system just crashed.
That's precisely it. And this is where we can bring in the polyvagal concept from Dr. Stephen Porges. We can simplify it a bit. Think of your autonomic nervous system like a security system with 3 main modes, kind of layered from newest, evolutionarily speaking, to oldest.
Okay, let's break down those 3 modes.
Right. So first, the newest circuit, the ventral vagal complex. This is your safe and social system. When it's online, you feel calm, connected, open to engagement. You can think clearly.
The ideal state.
Ideally, yes. Now, second, when there's a threat, the system shifts gears into sympathetic activation. That's your fight or flight response. Anxiety, agitation, racing heart, needing to escape or confront.
Got it.
But if the threat is chronic, if it feels overwhelming, inescapable, like constant moral criticism, or that feeling of being fundamentally rejected when you seek connection, the system can default to the oldest, most primal response, dorsal vagal shutdown. This is the freeze response.
So the functional paralysis she described, That's her body hitting the emergency brake, conserving energy because the threat feels like it's never going to end.
Exactly. The body basically declares, okay, I can't fight this, sympathetic. I can't flee from it, so I'm going to play dead, dorsal. That's where the exhaustion comes from, the collapse, the shallow breathing. It's a profound physiological survival response to chronic, unavoidable stress.
Wow. Okay, moving up a level to the psychological landscape. The core issues here seem to be this unresolved grief, identity diffusion, like who is she without the church, and this really key concept of ambivalent attachment.
Yes, we absolutely have to talk about attachment theory here from John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. Belinda seems to show what we call an anxious avoidant attachment style. It's a painful mix. Well, she has the anxious part, that deep longing for closeness, for belonging, the very thing the church and family promised. But then she has the avoidant part, this subconscious expectation of rejection, of pain, if she gets too close or shows vulnerability.
And again, that hug memory at age 7, that's the anchor for the avoidant part.
It's the core imprint. It confirmed her deepest fear. Seeking authentic emotional connection leads to pain, anger, rejection from the very source that should have felt safe, her grandmother. That one interaction basically encoded a rule deep in her limbic system. If I get close, I will get hurt.
And the high control religion demanding submission before you get acceptance just reinforced that same painful rule.
Perfectly. It mirrored the family dynamic.
Yeah.
Be who we need you to be, suppress your authentic self, and then maybe you'll belong.
Now, for our NCE students, let's frame this developmentally. Thinking about James Fowler's stages of faith development, where would Belinda fit?
Oh, she's squarely in stage 4, the individuative reflective stage. She's clearly moved beyond the unquestioning belief of childhood and adolescence. She's actively critiquing the dogma, the institutions.
Right.
She's trying to build her own spiritual coherence based on her experience and conscience, not just inheriting it. She's drawing her own map, which is intellectually very empowering, but as we see, emotionally incredibly isolating.
And if we look through Erickson's lens, his stages of psychosocial development, she seems to be wrestling with generativity versus stagnation.
Yes, absolutely. Her entire therapy project, writing that letter, facing this pain, it's a profound act of generativity. She's refusing to just sit passively in the inherited pain that would be stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she's actively working to transform that suffering into insight, into wisdom that's generativity. She's trying to ensure this intergenerational wound stops with her. Her healing is, in a way, a gift to her future self and potentially any children she might have.
Okay, let's widen the lens again to the social and spiritual context. Leaving a high-demand religion, people often describe it as a small death. You lose the community, the certainty, that whole cosmic framework all at once.
And that creates this intense isolation, a feeling that nobody outside that specific culture can really understand what you've lost or what you're going through. And sadly, that isolation is often reinforced by the very system she left behind.
Yeah, her description of her father, cordial unless I mention his church, that just screams emotional cutoff, doesn't it?
Textbook example.
Mm.
And this brings us right to Murray Bowen's family systems theory.
Right?
Her father's cordiality is conditional. It's fine, as long as nothing threatens the family system's emotional balance, like Belinda voicing her different beliefs.
Yeah.
That gets blocked. This is a classic struggle with differentiation. Belinda is trying to carve out her own autonomous identity, her own emotional boundary.
And the system pushes back.
Exactly. It tries to maintain the status quo through emotional distance, through conditional acceptance. Be like us, or we keep you at arm's length.
And spiritually, she's in that in-between state. You mentioned cultural liminality earlier, drawing from Victor Turner.
Yes, liminality literally meaning betwixt and between. It's like being in a long, dark hallway. You've left the room of your old faith, your old identity, but you haven't fully entered the new room yet. You're in transition.
Sounds unsettling.
Profoundly disorienting. It's a time of high anxiety because the old rules, the old maps for safety, they don't apply anymore. And the new ones haven't been written yet. But here's the thing. It's also the space where the most powerful transformation happens. Identity is often forged in the crucible of that uncertainty, in the absence of the old structures.
Before we move on from the context, we really need to touch on the feminist therapy lens. This feels crucial for understanding the depth of this inherited wound.
Oh, absolutely essential. Belinda's pain isn't just about theology or family dynamics. It's deeply intertwined with power and gender. She is, in a very real way, carrying the psychic residue, the unprocessed grief and rage of generations of women before her.
Including her grandmother.
Including her grandmother. Women whose identity, whose worth, whose spiritual value was entirely mediated by male-dominated institutions. Their voices were often silenced, their bodies controlled, their inner knowing, their self-trust systematically eroded.
So her rebellion, her refusal to submit to any system now that dictates her worth or silences her conscience, it's a reclamation of female autonomy.
It's a profound act of healing, not just for herself, but symbolically for her lineage. When she grieves her grandmother, she's likely also grieving the constraints, the potential, the silenced voice of her grandmother, shaped by patriarchal religious dogma. She isn't just healing her own trauma. She's completing an intergenerational arc. She's giving voice to the ancestors who were perhaps forced into silence.
That adds such a rich, vital layer to understanding her struggle. Okay, let's bring it back to the therapy room. The presenting problem. What's the immediate clinical picture she's bringing?
Well, the core challenge is this persistent, pervasive emotional distress. There's confusion about her identity, deep unresolved grief tied directly to leaving the church and the resulting family estrangement.
And the symptoms?
The symptoms are really expressions of a body constantly on guard. Crying spells that come out of nowhere, maybe. Rumination, getting stuck in thought loops, that emotional numbing we talked about. And the somatic exhaustion, that functional paralysis. It all points back to the nervous system.
And her stated goal?
She specifically wants release from inherited guilt. That's powerful. She wants to be able to put down the burden that her ancestors carried, maybe their grandmother carried, because she literally cannot bear its weight anymore.
What specifically triggered this crisis now, though? She's been managing this for decades, analyzing it. Why now?
It seems the precipitating events involved confronting the past much more directly. Rediscovering her grandmother's letters, maybe handling religious artifacts she still had tucked away.
They're like ghosts in the attic.
Exactly, these unresolved objects. Physical things can resurrect these embodied, implicit memories in a way that just thinking doesn't. And the very act of deciding to write and then read, that letter that likely cracked open decades of contained emotion, it initiated the crisis, but also the potential for healing.
And what's keeping her stuck? What are the maintaining factors that keep the distress cycling?
The main culprits seem to be her own very effective cognitive defenses. First, that intellectualization we mentioned. Keeping the grief purely cognitive, letting rumination replace genuine feeling. It prevents the deep emotional processing needed for integration.
And the second factor.
The ongoing relational triggers, particularly with her father. Every time she has contact and feels she has to suppress her authentic self to maintain that superficial cordiality.
It reinforces the old wound.
Precisely. It reactivates that childhood experience of being pushed away, reinforcing the core belief. Connection equals pain, or authenticity leads to rejection. It keeps the cycle going.
Given all this complexity, what are the goals for therapy? It sounds like it's way beyond just reducing symptoms.
Oh, absolutely. The goals are ambitious, deeply transformative. First, she needs to process the unresolved grief and resentment towards her family, especially her grandmother and father, moving from just analyzing it to actually feeling it safely. Second, she needs to reconcile belonging with authenticity. Can she find or build a community, relationships, where she can be her true self and still feel accepted and connected? Third, a big one, reconstructing a spiritual framework, something based on her own inner wisdom, profound self-trust, not on external authority or dogma.
And finally,
she needs to cultivate emotional regulation, learning practical skills to notice when she's heading towards shutdown, that functional paralysis, and learning how to gently guide her nervous system back towards a state of integrated safety and engagement.
this is such sensitive territory. For our NCE students, and really for anyone thinking about therapy around religious issues, we have to talk about the ethical considerations. This isn't just standard therapy, is it?
Absolutely not. It requires specific awareness. The first ethical mandate is cultural competence, which the ACA code highlights, A2C. The counselor must be informed about high-control religious environments, their dynamics, their language, the potential for spiritual abuse.
Why is that so crucial?
Because it means validating the immense struggle and courage involved in her spiritual questioning and departure without pathologizing her past beliefs or her current disbelief. If the therapist comes from a place of ignorance, or worse, judgment, they risk re-traumatizing her by subtly invalidating her lived experience or her culture of origin. They might accidentally replicate the very invalidation she's trying to heal from.
That makes sense. And the second key ethical point.
Empowerment. This is covered in ACA 8.4b, promoting client welfare. Given that her wounds are so deeply rooted in patriarchal authority, in systems that demanded submission, the therapist must be incredibly vigilant about not reenacting that dynamic.
So no replacing one dogma with another, like therapy dogma?
Exactly. Therapy must center her autonomy, her consent, her inner wisdom. The relationship needs to model power with, not power over. This provides the corrective emotional experience she needs, experiencing a relationship where her truth is welcomed, not judged, where connection doesn't require submission. The therapist's role is often to sit quietly, witness, facilitate her shift from analyzing theology to feeling embodied compassion, helping her move from asking, "Why did you do this?" to perhaps recognizing, "I see why you might have felt you couldn't do otherwise."
Okay, let's shift to clinical classification. The temporary diagnosis options using the DSM-5-TR. And we always need to preface this. These labels are tools, right? Ways to conceptualize the suffering, not define the person.
Precisely. Especially here where so much of the issue is existential, spiritual, and embodied. But for clinical communication and understanding patterns, a primary option might be adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood, F43.23.
Why that one?
It fits the timeline in the picture. Her symptoms, exhaustion, mood issues, functional problems clearly emerged during and following major life stressors, leaving her faith, confronting this deep ancestral stuff. The symptoms are persisting because the stressor has such profound personal meaning and hasn't been fully processed or integrated yet.
But given the trauma history, we need a strong rule-out option, maybe something more severe.
Yes, a critical rule-out is post-traumatic stress disorder, complex religious variant, F43.10. We need to consider CPTSD because the trauma wasn't a single event, but chronic emotional invalidation over years.
The constant moral scrutiny, the rejection.
Exactly. That prolonged exposure, combined with specific relational traumas like the age 7 rejection, leads to those pervasive negative beliefs about the self, the internal split, the difficulty feeling love fully. These are hallmarks of complex trauma.
And the religious context adds another layer.
It does. It often transforms trauma into deep moral confusion. When the system that hurts you also defined morality for you, it creates this terrible bind. Your own natural feelings, anger, doubt, desire, get labeled as sinful or wrong. This internal conflict, this profound shame about one's authentic self, is very common in spiritual abuse survivors and aligns with CPTSD presentations.
And finally, there's the essential contextual label, especially for faith transitions, the Z code.
Yes, we absolutely must include Z65.8, religious or spiritual problem. This isn't a diagnosis of illness, it's a crucial contextual factor. It acknowledges that her struggle is, in large part, an adaptive, though incredibly painful process of realigning her entire worldview, identity, and sense of meaning. Using the Z code helps ensure therapy focuses on growth and integration, not just pathology.
Makes sense. Briefly, why are other diagnoses maybe less likely at this stage?
Well, while she has depressive and anxious symptoms, we'd screen for something like persistent depressive disorder. But her issues seem so tightly linked to the specific stressors and relational conflicts. It doesn't sound like a baseline depression existing independently.
Okay.
And while you might see some oscillation between anger and longing, which could superficially look like borderline features, the root seems clearly tied to that disrupted attachment template and the high control environment, not a pervasive personality structure issue.
Yeah.
And somatic symptom disorder, less likely. Her physical symptoms, the collapse, they feel like direct physiological responses to overwhelming trauma, the dorsal shutdown, rather than an excessive worry about physical symptoms. The body's just doing what it needed to do to survive.
That distinction is really helpful. Okay, this shifts us beautifully towards treatment. Let's explore the theoretical frameworks, the different lenses or toolkits a counselor could use to help Belinda navigate these deep interwoven issues.
Right. A really valuable starting point is acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, developed by Stephen Hayes. ACT sees a lot of suffering as stemming from experiential avoidance, basically trying to escape or fight off painful thoughts, feelings, memories.
Which Belinda seems to be doing with her intellectualizing.
Exactly. She avoids the raw pain of grief by analyzing it, ruminating about it, so an ACT therapist would help her with diffusion.
Diffusion.
Yeah.
What does that look like in practice for her?
It might involve noticing that harsh inner critic, the voice of religious judgment, and learning to see it as just thoughts, like words passing through her mind or static on the radio rather than absolute commands or truths about her. Techniques like thanking her mind for the thought or visualizing the thoughts as leaves on a stream floating by. It creates distance.
Taking away their power.
Exactly. And the other core piece of ACT is values clarification. The therapist would help her explore. Okay, putting aside the old rules of shoulds and supposed pieces, what truly matters to you? Deep down, what kind of person do you want to be? What qualities do you want your life to stand for?
Like authenticity, maybe? Self-compassion?
Could be. The goal is to help her align her actions, her choices, with these freely chosen values, rather than continuing to be driven by the inherited value of, say, obedience or perfection. It's about building psychological flexibility, the ability to move towards what matters even when difficult thoughts and feelings show up, rather than needing certainty or the absence of pain.
Okay, another powerful framework for this kind of internal conflict is internal family systems, or IFS from Richard Schwartz.
IFS is wonderful here because it immediately depathologizes her internal chaos. The core idea is that the mind isn't monolithic. It's naturally made up of different parts, like an internal family. And this is key. No parts are inherently bad. They all develop with a positive, protective intention, even if their effects are problematic now.
So we'd help her identify her specific parts, like the critic part, maybe an angry protector, and that younger child part who felt rejected.
Precisely. The critic part might be carrying the religious moralism, trying desperately to keep her safe by making her perfect, avoiding judgment. The angry protector could be the part that flares up to push people away, trying fiercely to prevent that 7-year-old hurt from ever happening again. And the child part, often exiled, holds the original vulnerability, the longing for connection, and the pain of the rejection.
And the goal isn't to get rid of these parts.
No, not at all. The goal is self-leadership. IFS believes we all have a core self, characterized by qualities like curiosity, compassion, confidence, calmness. Therapy helps Valinda access this self so she can witness these protective parts with understanding, hear their fears, and offer them compassion, rather than being overwhelmed or blended with them. It's about bringing harmony to the internal system, which is often a powerful corrective for the dysfunction she experienced in her external family system.
Then integrating the feminist and multicultural therapy lens adds that crucial layer of understanding the power dynamics.
Yes. This lens explicitly validates her emotional responses, especially her anger. It helps reframe anger not as a sin, which her religious background likely taught her, but as moral intelligence. Anger is a signal, right?
Yeah.
And it tells her a boundary has been crossed or injustice is happening.
Right.
Therapy involves power analysis, looking together at how patriarchal narratives within both family and religion shaped her sense of self-worth, maybe scripted love as requiring submission or silencing herself. Healing then involves revoicing that suppressed agency, reclaiming her right to define her own values, her own spirituality, her own worth.
And because the trauma is so embodied, we absolutely need to bring in approaches that work directly with the body. Somatic experiencing from Peter Levine,
Right.
And polyvagal integration, Stephen Porges.
Yes, the body holds the score, as Bessel van der Kolk says. That stored defensive energy, the freeze, the tension, needs a safe way out. Somatic experiencing focuses on titration.
Titration, meaning small doses?
Exactly. Gently touching into the felt sense of the trauma, maybe the tightness in her chest when she thinks of the rejection, but only for brief moments, allowing the nervous system to process a little bit of that activation without getting overwhelmed. We don't want a flood, just a trickle.
And pendulation.
Pendulation is about gently guiding her attention back and forth between the sensation of activation, the tightness, the fear, and a sensation of safety or calm in the present moment, maybe the feeling of her feet on the floor or a calming image.
What does that oscillation achieve?
It teaches the nervous system fundamentally that the activation, the danger signal, is temporary and manageable. It proves to the body that it can return to a state of relative safety and calm. This is how the system gradually learns to shift out of that default docile shutdown and back into ventral engagement, that state where she can breathe easier, feel safer, and connect more openly.
And finally, pulling it all together with a narrative and existential integration perspective.
Narrative therapy would help her continue the process she started with the letter, externalizing the problem. The problem isn't Belinda. The problem is the oppressive religious narrative or the legacy of conditional love. It helps separate her identity from the story she was handed.
Rewriting her own story.
Exactly. Reauthoring her life from her own perspective. Maybe even giving voice to the inner child's perspective. And existentially, therapy needs to help her grapple with the profound, sometimes terrifying implications of freedom. Leaving a rigid structure means facing uncertainty, meaninglessness, the responsibility of creating her own meaning. It's helping her bear that paradox you mentioned earlier. Freedom and uncertainty arrive in the same breath.
That is such a comprehensive and adaptable toolkit. Okay, let's get really practical now. What specific interventions and rationales might a counselor actually use with Belinda? We need to connect the why rationale to the what intervention for our NCE listeners.
Okay, intervention 1. Values clarification, drawing from ACT. The rationale here is to shift her focus away from the paralyzing weight of inherited guilt and towards a sense of self-chosen purpose and direction. We might use something like the funeral reflection exercise.
Asking her to imagine what she wants to be remembered for.
Exactly. It sounds morbid, but it can powerfully clarify what truly matters to her now, transforming grief over the past into motivation for a future aligned with her authentic values.
Okay. Intervention 2. Parts mapping and self-integration using IFS tools.
She needs a way to make this internal world less chaotic. So maybe actually drawing her parts, giving them names, writing down what they fear, what they're trying to achieve. The rationale is unblending, creating space between her core self and these powerful protective parts. This fosters self-compassion and helps her differentiate the voice of fear, like the critic, from the voice of her own wisdom, self.
Intervention 3. Somatic grounding and pendulation from SE and polyvagal theory.
This is about teaching her practical skills to manage overwhelming feelings in the moment. Learning to notice subtle body cues, the temperature of her hands, the rhythm of her breath, the feeling of her spine against the chair. These become anchors. The rationale is building interoceptive awareness and trust, learning to listen to her body's signals as information, not just noise or danger, and practicing the oscillation between activation and calm to increase her nervous system's resilience.
Intervention 4. Feminist consciousness-raising dialogue.
This would involve conversations directly exploring how patriarchal norms within her family and religion shaped her identity, her expectations of love, her relationship with her own anger or ambition. The rationale is empowerment through reframing, helping her see her righteous anger not as a flaw or a sin, but as a healthy signal of boundaries and integrity. It supports her reclaiming her voice.
Intervention 5. Compassionate imagery, drawing from compassion-focused therapy, CFT.
This is a powerful technique developed by Paul Gilbert. We might guide her to visualize a compassionate figure, maybe an idealized ancestor, perhaps even her grandmother imagined differently, offering words of kindness or release like, "I did the best I could with what I knew. You are free now. It's okay."
And the rationale for that.
It's directly aimed at activating the brain's parasympathetic soothing system. Visualizing kindness and compassion actually triggers the release of oxytocin, which calms the threat system. It's a neurological antidote to the chronic activation fueled by religious shame and self-criticism.
Intervention 6. Maybe suggesting group therapy for religious trauma recovery.
Absolutely. The rationale here is primarily to break the profound isolation. In a group with others who share similar experiences, she gets universality, I'm not alone, sees models of healing, and experiences secure, non-conditional connection. It also promotes neuroception of safety. Her nervous system unconsciously picks up cues of safety from being understood and accepted by peers.
And finally, Intervention 7. Potentially using EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, maybe specifically targeting that age 7 rejection memory.
Yes, EMDR could be very useful here. The rationale is very precise. That vivid, emotionally charged memory of being pushed away is likely stored in a fragmented way in her limbic system, easily triggered. The bilateral stimulation used in EMDR seems to help the brain process and desensitize the intense emotional charge associated with the memory. It helps integrate it into her broader narrative memory network, indexing it as something that happened in the past and was survived, rather than something that feels like it's still happening right now.
That's a fantastic range of potential tools. Okay, for our NCE students listening intently, let's quickly distill this down. What are the absolute key NCE concepts they should pull from this discussion for their exams?
Right, focus on the vocabulary and how it applies. For ACT, no cognitive diffusion, experiential avoidance, and values clarification. For IFS, understand parts work, critic, protector, child, etc. The goal of self-leadership and the process of unblending.
Got it. For feminist therapy.
Key concepts are power analysis, examining societal power structures, the importance of an egalitarian relationship in therapy, and reframing anger as valid and informative.
And the somatic and neurological pieces.
Master the somatic terms. Pendulation, titration, interoception, awareness of internal body sensations, and definitely know the polyvagal basics. Dorsal shutdown, freeze, versus ventral engagement, safe social. For CFT, remember soothing system activation via compassion and shame regulation.
And clinically, don't forget the importance of Z codes for contextual factors like religious problems and the whole process of cultural formulation, understanding the person within their cultural context to avoid misdiagnosis.
Exactly. And for deeper dives, the recommended reading really provides the foundation. Hayes for ACT, Schwartz for IFS, Levine for somatic experiencing, Judith Comas Diaz for those crucial feminist and multicultural perspectives, and Paul Gilbert for CFT. These are the thinkers behind the tools that can help someone like Belinda move from insight to embodied change.
Okay, now let's really dive deep into mind-body connection. This is where the metaphors we've been using become literal biology. We talked about Belinda's functional paralysis as physiological collapse. What's happening neurologically there?
We touched on it with polyvagal theory. Her nervous system, facing what felt like chronic, inescapable threat, emotional, existential, defaulted to the most ancient survival strategy, the immobility or freeze response. That's the dorsal vagal shutdown. Her system essentially declared too much input, too much danger, shutting down non-essential operations. Engaging, moving, even thinking clearly takes energy and felt too risky. So the system conserved resources by collapsing.
But then the act of writing and reading that letter, we called it the thawing letter. How did that start to reverse the freeze? There's a paradox there, speaking to someone who's dead.
The paradox is fascinating. It works because the performance of speaking her truth happens in an environment perceived as safe. The deceased grandmother cannot actually reject her or punish her in that moment. There's zero immediate social risk.
The illusion of safety.
Exactly. And that perceived safety allows her ventral vagal circuits, the ones involved in social engagement, facial expression, vocalization, to come online without being overridden by fear. By speaking her truth without experiencing immediate negative consequences, her limbic system, the brain's emotion center, gets a chance to experience something different. It starts to thaw, to reorganize. She's essentially practicing relational safety in a low-stakes environment.
And what about the chronic inherited guilt? You said that's not just a feeling, it's biochemical.
Yes, this is where psychoneuroimmunology comes, in the science connecting our thoughts, feelings, nervous system, and immune system. Chronic guilt, especially the kind rooted in religious shame, I am fundamentally flawed, keeps the sympathetic nervous system subtly activated. This leads to elevated levels of stress hormones like cortisol.
Which isn't good long-term.
Definitely not. Sustained high cortisol impacts the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the body's main stress regulator. It can disrupt sleep, digestion, weaken immune function, increase inflammation. So therapy that fosters self-acceptance, forgiveness, compassion. It's literally a biochemical intervention. Every deep breath taken without self-condemnation, every tear shed with self-compassion sends a signal via the vagus nerve. The threat is passing. We are safe now. It helps recalibrate that whole system.
Let's go back to that pivotal age 7 memory one more time. How does neuroscience explain integrating that kind of early trauma?
Well, drawing on folks like van der Kolk, we understand that trauma, especially early relational trauma, is often stored somatically in the body's sensations and impulses, often before it's fully encoded semantically in words and a coherent story. For Belinda, the sudden tightness in her chest, the held breath, the impulse to withdraw when thinking about connection is the memory, in a way.
So therapy helps translate the body's language.
Yes. By guiding her to notice and name those bodily sensations, somatic mindfulness, while staying present and feeling relatively safe with the therapist, we bring that implicit, felt memory into explicit, conscious awareness. This process is key for memory reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation, meaning updating the memory.
Essentially, yes. When a memory is activated, there's a brief window where it can be modified before being stored again. By pairing the old memory, the pain, the fear of rejection, with a new contradictory experience, the therapist's safe, attuned presence, the brain can update the memory file. The hippocampus can reindex it. It's like changing the tag from danger still happening to past event survived. The memory doesn't disappear, but its emotional charge and its grip on the present lessens significantly.
And Paul Gilbert's work with CFT shows that practicing compassion isn't just a nice idea, it actively rewires the brain.
Absolutely. Compassion-focused therapy is applied neuroplasticity. When Belinda deliberately cultivates compassion for herself, maybe even eventually for her grandmother's limitations, or when she visualizes receiving compassion, it stimulates the release of oxytocin and activates brain regions associated with caregiving and affiliation, part of the ventral vagal complex.
Soothing system.
Exactly. This directly counteracts the brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, which has been hyperactive due to the trauma and shame. She is literally strengthening the neural pathways for safety, connection, and kindness, making them more dominant than the old pathways of fear, judgment, and withdrawal. She's replacing the critic's neural network with a self's network, one compassionate breath at a time.
Let's widen the lens one last time with a few philosophical ideas that seem to resonate here. Anil Seth talks about our perception of reality as a controlled hallucination. How does that apply?
Well, Belinda's former reality, structured by her high-control faiths, was a kind of controlled hallucination, a predictive model of the world based on divine order, specific rules, and promised outcomes, all constantly reinforced by the community. When she left, that predictive model, that hallucination, shattered.
Leaving her adrift.
Completely. So, therapy, in part, is helping her rebuild her predictive coding, helping her brain learn to make new predictions based on her current reality, her internal experience, her authentic values. Predictions like, if I speak my truth kindly, I might find connection. Or, feeling my grief won't destroy me, it can lead to release. It's a fundamental recalibration of how her brain anticipates and perceives the world, shifting from predictions based on external dogma to predictions based on internal felt sense and lived experience.
In Donald Hoffman's interface theory, he suggests we don't see reality directly, just a useful interface.
Right. For Belinda, the religious symbols, the temple, the scriptures, specific rituals or clothing, were interface symbols. They provided quick, efficient access to concepts like meaning, belonging, safety, divine approval. But as she deconverts, she realizes these are just icons on the desktop of reality, not reality itself.
So she has to interact differently.
She has to learn to interact more directly with the raw data of her own experience. Her sensations, emotions, relationships. The sacred, the meaningful, starts to migrate from the external symbol to the internal sensation. The feeling of breath in her lungs, the warmth of connection with a trusted friend, the awe of nature. Meaning becomes embodied, not just symbolic.
And finally, how does her individual healing journey connect to something larger? You mentioned Teilhard de Chardin.
De Chardin had this idea of the new sphere, a kind of thinking layer or collective consciousness enveloping the planet, evolving over time. From this perspective, Belinda's intensely personal work of healing trauma, integrating her psyche, learning self-compassion and emotional regulation. It's not just for her. Each individual who does this work subtly contributes to the evolution of that collective consciousness. She's helping the human noosphere learn better ways to handle conflict, fear, and difference, moving from fear-based obedience towards compassionate awareness and self-regulation.
That's a beautiful, expansive thought. Okay, bringing it back down to earth. Practically speaking, how does therapy actually help someone like Belinda navigate this incredibly complex terrain?
Fundamentally, the therapist acts as a safe co-regulator. In the therapy room, the counselor intentionally models a calm, grounded, non-judgmental presence. Because our nervous systems are designed to attune to each other thanks to mirror neurons and polyvagal pathways, Belinda's system can gradually begin to sync up with the therapist's regulated state.
Learning safety through relationship.
Exactly. She internalizes the experience. I can feel these difficult things, speak these difficult truths, and this person stays present, stays accepting. Maybe connection doesn't always equal pain. The therapist becomes the secure base that the 7-year-old self desperately needed but didn't get.
And progress isn't just measured in insights, right? It's physical.
Absolutely. Progress often looks like subtle physiological shifts first. A spontaneous deeper breath during the session, a relaxation in the shoulders, maybe the return of genuine spontaneous laughter or tears that feel cleansing rather than overwhelming, a steadier gaze. These are somatic markers that integration is happening, that the nervous system is shifting towards safety.
Therapy helps translate the body's signals.
It helps translate the body's often confusing language, the tightness, the numbness, the trembling back into meaningful information that the conscious mind can understand and respond to compassionately. And ultimately, it supports the emergence of an embodied spirituality, finding meaning, connection, and transcendence, not necessarily in theology, but in direct experience, in nature, in authentic relationships, in creative expression, in the wisdom of her own body.
This is so important for our listeners. When should someone who might recognize parts of their own story in Belinda's consider seeking therapy? What are the signs that the pain might be more than just, say, normal grief or adjustment?
That's a crucial question. I'd say definitely consider seeking professional help if you experience recurrent, intrusive feelings of guilt or shame or a persistent underlying fear of punishment related to your faith background, even if you've consciously left and logically disagree with those beliefs.
Okay, what else?
If you experience significant emotional numbness, especially around topics of family or spirituality, or a chronic, unexplained fatigue that seems linked to these areas and really impacts your ability to function or enjoy life.
Also, maybe difficulty knowing your own mind.
Yes, if you find it really hard to distinguish your own personal values and beliefs from the moral codes you inherited, if you feel confused about what you genuinely think or feel, separate from what you were taught to think or feel.
And the physical symptoms we talked about.
Definitely. If you notice consistent somatic symptoms like chest tightness, stomach problems, chronic headaches, muscle tension that seem to flare up specifically when dealing with moral conflicts, religious triggers, or interactions with family members tied to the old system.
And the big picture stuff.
And critically, seek help if you're struggling with profound existential despair, a feeling of meaninglessness, or a loss of identity, wrestling with that question, who am I now if I'm not who I was taught to be? Or if you feel overwhelming, persistent isolation and loneliness after leaving a faith community or experiencing spiritual betrayal, therapy can provide a vital bridge during that disorienting transition, helping you navigate the loss and discover your authentic self on the other side.
Which brings us back full circle to that beautiful, evocative metaphor from the start, infants on thrones. Belinda's journey, it really is a rite of passage, isn't it, into a different kind of knowing, a different kind of power.
It truly is. The infant represents that emerging consciousness, new, curious, vulnerable, without all the heavy filters of inherited dogma. It's the compassion itself, ready to learn and lead from within. And the throne. The throne is her own nervous system, her own body. The goal is for it to become a stable, regulated seat of awareness from which that infant self can perceive and engage with the world. She's learning to rule her own internal kingdom, not through fearful obedience, but through wisdom, self-compassion, and embodied presence.
Her story feels like a microcosm of a larger human story, maybe. A shift from seeking validation through external authorities and conditional love based on obedience, towards finding worth internally and cultivating unconditional love, or at least compassion, rooted in shared humanity and empathy.
I think so. By doing this incredibly difficult work of rewiring her own ancestral circuitry, untangling the knots of trauma and inherited belief, she's effectively ending the automatic replication of that conditioned suffering, at least within her own life, and potentially for any lineage that follows.
When she reaches that place of deep, embodied forgiveness or acceptance, not necessarily condoning the past, but releasing its power over her present.
She's not just healing herself. As we touched on with the Noosphere idea, each person who undertakes this journey contributes, neuron by neuron, to a collective shift. Stabilizing her own system helps, in some small way, stabilize the larger human system. Learning self-regulation ripples outwards.
And maybe that's what it means for all of us to be infants on thrones. Fragile yet ascending, rewriting the nervous system of the world one compassionate breath at a time. And with that, the AI Puppet Show endeth. For now, at least. Bring on the little girl.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.
You're welcome.